Welcome to Code Narratology, or How I Learned to Stop Bike Shedding and Love the Linter. So bike shedding is this idea that if you have a tremendously complicated, important project, such as building a nuclear power station, nobody wants to have an opinion on the really big, important stuff. They'll just rubber stamp it. But you want to be seen to be doing something, so you'll argue endlessly about the shape of the bike sheds. Now, coders do a lot of this when they sort of get hung up on where the semicolon should go or what style of functions. And when I heard about these debates, it reminded me of when I studied English in like the last years of the last millennium. It sounds a lot like literary critical theory. So literary critical theorists, we've got this bunch, the formalists. It's a lot of old white guys. You know that they would be active on Hacker News and they would have very strong opinions. So there's a Russian contingent, a French contingent, and they basically looked at the way that people were reading novels. And so this was happening around the 60s. At the time, the reader was meant to try and guess what the author meant. So not only did they read the novel, they read up on the author's culture, ethnicity, historical context. They were trying to divine what the author meant. Now, Roland Barthes said, nonsense. The death of the author. He said we should only look at a text to find out about that text. You can't include details that are not in the text. J.K. Rowling. So we're going to build this up. If we take the example of a post-it note has an author and a reader, you would think. It might be the same person. You might be writing yourself a note. Roland Barthes says, nonsense. So he says that the author and the reader, they still exist, but they're not important for when we're looking at the text. So these two people pop into existence, an implied author and an implied reader. They're like virtual particles. They just sort of pop in. If we take a bit more complicated prose, get milk, he wrote on a post-it note in his illegible scrawl. Okay, that sounds kind of judgy, and you'll actually find that the implied author is this separate character from the real author. The implied author is very smart, urbane, witty. The implied author has got their stuff together. The actual author might be a bit of a mess. Now, actually, two more people pop into existence now. We have a narrator and a narratee. So this is the actual character giving the narrative and the person receiving it. Now, quite often they are implicit. They might not be named. But if we look at really old-timey texts, let me tell you, dear reader, of the day he wrote Get Milk. The me is the narrator. You, dear reader, are the narratee. Sometimes these are actual named characters in the text. So authors have a lot of fun with narrators and narratology. Dracula is an epistolary novel. So every chapter is like a letter with a narrator and a narratee. The Girl on the Train all hinges on the narrator, which I'm not going to spoil. So the narrator is the voice, the face of the text, a beautiful face. And really, if the narrator is doing their job, you should barely be aware of the implied author. The implied author should just be hanging around in the background. So what does this have to do with code? What does this have to do with code? Okay. I don't have time to go into the narratee, implied reader, and reader section. They go in the bin. Instead, I'm going to look at the sort of writing section, so the author, the implied author, and the narrator. So those map in a fairly straightforward way. I'm ahead of schedule. So the author becomes the coder. They are real people, but when you're looking at the code, those real people don't matter. Don't worry about them. The implied author becomes the implied coder. So all of those little flourishes you like to put into your code, all of the little stylistic things, that's the implied coder. Now, the narrator is a unified code style. If your entire code base is using one style, that creates a narratorial voice. Okay, it's very clear, everyone can understand it. Now, there are several ways of achieving this. You could have all of your coders follow a style guide and spend hours arguing about it in code reviews, or you could just suck it up and get a linter, okay? The linter is going to put a big, happy face on your code. No one needs to spend time bike shedding and arguing about it. You do not want to be the miserable cat in the background. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. And as my gift to you, here's your bad pun. Why did the computer spy quit? Because he couldn't hack it anymore. Our next speaker is Anna. And Anna has a background in design, video, and photography, and started developing for the web over 10 years ago as a hobby. Fortunately, she's never looked back and is currently a front-end developer at Hectare. She's interested in ethics, indie web, sustainability, and cat.
Hey.
And I didn't do my job, obviously. So feel free to start whenever you want and press the next button.
So hi everyone, I'm here to talk to everyone who is considering posting that draft post that you have on your notes, but still doesn't have courage to do it, and you don't know why. But I've been there, I've done that, and I want to tell you as well that I don't want anyone to think that in order to be seen as a professional, you have to blog. That's not what I'm going for. It's just for a final push that some of you, like myself, needed. So one thing I'm particularly annoyed about recently is that social media became a quick and accessible way to share online. However, it boils my blood that recently we rather tweet for our cats or career advice instead of blogging it. And the reason why it annoys me is that when I go on holidays, it's gone. It's like when I came back, if any of you posted the latest front-end development, I've missed it. It's gone like a toot in the wind. So it's quite frustrating, but not only that, it's also not searchable. Unless I've memorized your name or the day you've posted it, I just cannot find it anymore. Or if you just don't have social media, or if you're in a location or in a country where social media is blocked, it's gatekeeping as well. So at any time, your accounts can be deleted as well. So I feel that we've replaced blogging with social media, but I don't think it's working, and it's affecting all of us as a community. But slowly, things are changing, and the community has been aware of this and talking about this more recently. So for those of you who were here last year, there was a presentation about the indie web as well, okay. So the community is aware of it, and we're talking more and more about it. So there's initiatives like the Indie Web or the New Year hashtag, which brings the community together and gives you all the tools and help in order to get your content online and stuff like that. However, my blocker is not technical, but mentally. So how many of you have tried to share something and thought, I'm blank space of my content, which to me usually means shy or embarrassed? Funny enough, I only think about this when I'm trying to share stuff that is not technical. So I want all of you to think that you're more than your job title. Whatever content you want to share, especially on your blog, it's valuable for the whole community, and you should do it. Or, I'm very guilty of this one, everyone already knows this, or why should I blog about this thing that I'm just learning? People will think it's useless, or they'll mock me and I'll become a meme on the internet. Funny enough, that's not what I think at all when I find something that it's not particularly what I'm looking for. I just open 1,000 tabs on my browser, and then if it's not what I want, I just like close it. I don't think poorly of anyone. So why am I so harsh on myself? Why do I think my technical content is not good enough? So there are realistic consequences versus your fears. Well, my fear is to be constantly like the ones I just mentioned, but in reality, I don't even have enough visitors in my blog to mock me. So it's just weird. But you should embrace your fears. Your fears are always in the back of your head. And actually, it's a bit of a survival skill. Just acknowledge them and work along with them, because they are like a little checkbox. For example, I'm really afraid of people mocking my English skills. Therefore, I just take along like 3, 4, 5 times to check if I don't have any typos. And your fears are part of your personality. And obviously, the most direct consequence of blogging is that, yeah, it can actually help your career a little bit. It'll make you slightly more visible, or a lot. But it is a direct consequence, but you should definitely just be having fun. But mostly, I'm here to tell you that I love reading about your experiences, your thoughts, your travels, and everything you do, because it reminds me that my peers are not code or design machines. They are humans like myself who have fears, doubts, and joys, work-related or not, and all your contributions keep the community going. They stop the culture of overworking, and they actually foster empathy. So, if you do blog, if you feel like this actually helped you a little bit to publish anything, just send me your blogs, please. I'm really bored. I need stuff to read. And that's it.
Thank you, Anna. I managed to find a related pun for you. Why don't Vikings like sending emails? Because they prefer Norse code. Our next speaker is Sim. And Sim is a Brighton-based freelance web designer and developer who has designed and built innovative sites for clients of all shapes and sizes. Before going freelance, Sim was head of design and technology at an international publishing company. His multifarious career also includes a decade as a journalist and several years as a homelessness campaigner. Luckily, he's a passionate believer in the benefits that wide and varied experience can bring the web industry. And thank you for the $10 words for a native English speaker. They helped me improve on stage. Whenever you're ready, press the next button. Good luck.
Okay. Hey, okay. There were some words on that, but that's okay. Initially. I don't know what's happened to them. Okay, so I do a lot of work on WordPress, building and maintaining custom themes. I'm both a designer and a developer, and that's the kind of the subject of this talk. Are there any other people here who do both design and development? Cool. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant, because I sometimes feel a bit insecure about being both, and that's what this talk is about. So, I sometimes design sites for other people to build. That last slide was one I designed. This is one someone else designed and I built. The files came to me as Illustrator files, of all things. This is one I designed and built, so it went from concept to wireframes to a test site to final completion and support. So, and that was a custom. Okay, so sometimes I remember when I first went freelance, I felt like being a designer and developer. People would be amazed at my dual skills. Like, who is this guy who can do both? But the reaction I more normally got was that one. Suspicion. As if people felt, well, you can't really do both. Which one is it that you really do? Which one is just the hobby? But so that's why I thought it might be useful if I'd shared some of my thoughts on doing both. But it's not just other people's kind of suspicion you have to contend with. It's your own. Sometimes I kind of feel like I'm kind of suspicious of myself, of the fact I'm both a designer and developer. Because I sometimes feel like, okay, well, maybe because I do both, I'm not as good as a real developer, or my designs are not going to be as good as someone who just does design. So I think in a way there's something, in a way we people who do both, we need to kind of redefine ourselves. And what that involves is we have to kind of emphasize our wide-ranging skill set. Because as people who do web design and development, we can offer a combined service for smaller clients. We can work in a larger team and just kind of divert our skills where they're needed. And we also understand the perspective of the other side, so to speak. So we design sites. Oh, this slide's come up. So we design sites that are easy to build, and we do our best to kind of match the kind of vision of the original web design. But most important, I think working in those two areas helps stretch your brain, because you're developing mental flexibility of working in two very different areas. But I wonder if perhaps my own internal doubts about being a designer and developer stem from the fact we haven't claimed a real name for ourselves. And names are important, and that's what this slide is about. If you don't claim a name for yourself, perhaps other people will give you a name, and names can say quite a lot about you. So this is the name I've come up with for people like me who do both. It's my best stab so far at it. I thought about web designer, but that doesn't encompass the kind of development side of it. I thought of front-end designer, but that I sometimes think front-end isn't a term that end users understand so well. So creative developer is what I came up with, but I'd be interested in people's thoughts. I'm slightly ahead. Oh, here we go, yes. But if you're going to do both, if you're going to do development and web design, you need to make sure your superpowers are up to date. So here are my thoughts on that. Firstly, remember to specialize. Your field of expertise may be broad, but you can still specialize in certain things. Get all the tools. If you're doing a wide area, you need the best tools to support you. Keep your skills up to date and collaborate. Just because you can work on your own doesn't mean you should do all the time. I work in a co-working environment in Brighton, and some of the best work I've done is with other freelancers in different areas. And while I could do both design and development, it's been fantastic when I've worked with either one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sim. Your bad pun today is, how many programmers does it take to change a light bulb? None, it's a hardware problem. Our next speaker is going to be Shak Gupta, and she's a Mozilla Tech speaker coming from Pune, India. She's a software engineer by profession and a deep learning enthusiast. In her free time, she loves painting. Good luck. When you're ready, just press next.
Thank you, Alex. So today I'm going to be talking about deep speech, which, is it wrong? That's not my slide. Wait. Okay. Can we like reset the time? Thank you. Okay. So I find deep speech really exciting because slowly we're moving towards end-to-end deep learning-based solutions for everything. It was image recognition before, now it's speech recognition. So traditionally, the way these systems worked was there was an audio sent to the acoustic model that guessed the phonemes that might be present. And then that was sent to the phoneme model, which guessed the words that might be present. And then that was sent to the language model, which tried to guess the probability of co-occurrence of words. For example, the cat ran and the hat ran. So maybe acoustic and phoneme model thought they were similar, but the language model can come in and say, no, that cannot possibly go together. And then there's the output. So there were a lot of failures of these systems, like low speech-to-noise ratio, and then speaker variability, a very bad performance in natural and conversational speech. Now, before diving into deep speech as such, I'd like to talk a bit about deep learning, so which is a subset of machine learning methods, which is based on learning data representations as opposed to task-specific algorithms. Now, deep speech uses end-to-end deep learning-based architecture, and feed-forward neural networks is a very simple model of deep learning. So it basically is a bunch of nodes connected to each other in layers, weighted connections, and each node perform a small computation, and there's a nonlinear function to squash the output. Basically, the gist is that you can basically approximate any kind of function that you want to. The parameters are found out by a series of backpropagation, which is kind of like finding out the coefficients to an equation. But if you want something for a sequence-based data, like text or speech, you want recurrent neural networks, which are kind of the same, but it has one time-tick memory, which is important because words in a statement are related to each other, right? So the context, the previous information is important. So basically the output of a current node considers the input of the current node as well as the output of the previous node. Now deep speech uses, as I said before, end-to-end deep learning. So you don't have to have modules or hard-coded features to tell it to look for phonemes or something else. It just figures out how to eliminate noise. It knows what features to pick. So these are like, there are a couple of feed-forward layers, and then there's a unidirectional recurrent neural network. So it doesn't have to be like you feed in the whole input and then you get the whole output. You can feed in 100 milliseconds of audio, get the output, and then use that as the initial state for the next 100 milliseconds of audio. So it works flawlessly for live transcriptions. Okay. And so there's some stuff about CTC and softmax, which I'll not get into the details of, but for example, if I say view source, or if I'm drunk and I say view source. So there's a difference between the length of the statements, right? The CTC eliminates the need of having an algorithm for adding an alignment or padding. It basically has a system of inserting blanks between repetitions. So as you can see here in view source, there are blanks inserted and it eliminates them in backpropagation. The development technology is Python, C++, TensorFlow. They've used a lot of data sets to train it, like Fisher, Switchboard, and also Common Voice, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And using deep speech is basically as simple as pip install deep speech. You get a command line utility to use deep speech. You can use the models that have been published by Mozilla, trained by them for days, and you can use their parameters to test your stuff very easily. Common Voice project was something that Mozilla initiated to make voice technology open and accessible for everyone. Because when large corporations use data sets, they don't really publish it for everyone. You can go onto the website, contribute your own voice, and validate other existing ones in your own language, actually. So there are a lot of languages that Mozilla is working on. And if you want to contribute, you can go to voice.mozilla.org. You can scan this QR code to get the relevant resources, or the one on the next slide. Keep your phones ready. You can go onto the GitHub, Deep Speech, and contribute there. And if you have any doubts at all, I'll be around. The team hangs out on the machine learning channel on IRC, and there's a discourse channel also. So that's all I wanted to say. 5 minutes is really very short, but do get back to me. I'll be around. Thank you for having me at ViewSource.
Thank you. That was proper, right on time. I appreciate that. If you didn't catch the QR code, I'm going to publish all the slides that went up here straight after the lightning talks. You can check them out there. In the meantime, my bad pun for you is, what did the motherboard say to the new software? I'll show you who's DOS. Next up is Andre. Join me. Don't be shy, Andre. I've never known you to be shy. Andre is a Mozilla tech speaker focused on decentralization technologies and is an active member of the secure Scuttlebutt community. I hope I said that right. In the recent years, he's published books about Firefox OS and managed a web literacy program in vulnerable neighborhoods of Frio. He's a firm believer in empowerment through technological experimentation. Really, everybody with the $10 words? Thank you. He moved recently to London, where he lives with his wife, cats, and more IoT boards that he can ever put into use. Whenever you're ready, hit next and have fun.
Thank you. Thank you all. So, basically, I just moved to London. And it was a big move for me. I'm Brazilian. And I've been feeling something that we Brazilians call saudade. Saudade is a difficult concept. It doesn't really have a translation. It's like a nostalgia, bittersweet thing. You can feel saudade of the childhood games, or saudade of things that were not lost in the past, for example, hamburgers. It's a difficult concept. And the thing is that with different languages, such as Portuguese or English, you get different concepts that you can use, more ergonomic or not. It's very comfortable for use in Portuguese, this word saudade, but it's really hard in English. Basically, with new languages comes new concepts, or the easiness to use new concepts. It's the same thing with computer languages. For example, it's much easier to reason about relational data in SQL than it is in assembly, for example. And I think that we need more programming languages so that we can try more concepts. But I want to move to an old concept now, which is basically agriculture, a very old concept. This is what the Europeans did in South America when they arrived, plantations. Oh, it's not there. Oh, I mixed the slides. You will see a plantation soon. Basically, plantations are when you have a single monoculture everywhere. All your eyes can see is a monoculture. And the thing is that plantations are really not good for the environment or for you. Basically, they degrade the soil, and you can't survive on monoculture. But there are alternatives to plantations. There are many alternatives, and the degradation that they generate is horrifying. One of the alternatives is something that was practiced by ancient civilizations in South America, and it's called a milpa. Milpa is not a monoculture. Milpa is when you have different cultures all together on the same spot. So you plant things that are complementary. So they help each other and they don't degrade the soil. Mayan milpas are still fertile today, even 1,000 years later. And the thing is, how this ties back to computer? Basically, right now, we are living on a JavaScript plantation. It's a monoculture of JavaScript. I love JavaScript, just like I love sugarcane and soy. But I think that our ecosystem could be more fertile. I think that we need not to replace JavaScript with something. We need to complement it with more stuff, like a milpa. And I want a web milpa. I want us to bring more languages to the front end through WebAssembly and compilation to JavaScript, like Elm, for example. I want us all to build web milpas. And to prove to you that it's easy to build new languages, this presentation here was created in a brand new language. I just built a new language for this talk. And basically, if I can create a language, any of you can create a language. And I think that we should be experimenting more with building languages for the front end. Languages that compile to JavaScript or WebAssembly. I don't care. I will even show you a piece of my language shortly, so that you can see that I can have a lot of expression. So just like learning a new human language that allows you to express more stuff, new concepts, you can have a language, for example, for making slideshows that makes it natural to use slideshows. And you can bring that to the web. So the call to action for you all is, let's experiment with languages. Let's experiment with new forms of expression in the web. Let's build a web milpa together, so that our future ecosystem might be as fertile as a Mayan web milpa. I would like to thank you all for having me here. And I think that if you want to talk more about languages and see the very nice and cute parser I built for this, just hit outside and we can talk. I can show you the source code. It's brand easy. And I think that we should all be playing with this stuff. The source code is on GitHub, and I'm on every single platform besides Facebook. I'm slowly moving. And basically, just thanks for having me here. Let's build languages for client side. Thank you.